Today I want to talk about some of the extras that make roach fishing easier. I do a lot of active fishing, could be fishing on the waggler, sat on a box, or stood up trotting with a waggler or a stick float or an avon float. So having bait to hand is really useful. One thing I've never been a great fan of, and I've owned a couple over the years, is bait aprons. I do have a Shakespeare one at the moment. Years ago I had a Brennan and Hickman one. They just, I don't know, they get in the way. I don't do that well with them. I've got a small cloth bag with a tape that I can fix around my waist and put a few maggots. There are times trotting where you're stood out in the river and you can't get a bait stand in, you can't get the bank stick into the gravel, and that's the only real answer. You just need the bait handy somewhere, and that does happen, especially on the Stour and the Avon. The banks, the riverbed can be very hard, almost impenetrable. But mostly when you're actually on the bank itself, it's usually mud and stuff like that, so it's easy to get a bank stick in. The first bait stand I ever had was a little metal device with it sort of came down with a cross shape, so you could clip on 4 bait boxes, and they were okay. You could put, like I say, maggot boxes on there without any problems. They clipped on, designed for the standard sort of old 2-pint bait boxes, but they were no good for putting a ground bait bowl. One idea with a ground bait bowl would be to put a nut and bolt through the base of it with some big washers. Have done that for people, have used that, and that sort of sits on there. But around about 1980, my mate Phil said, how about we make a really good bait stand for both maggot boxes and ground bait bowls. He was working at a factory that did fiberglass moulding, very small factory, making tiny little hovercraft and eventually sort of 8-wheel vehicles with moon tyres. And so he made a mould up in plywood, and then we made a mould from that, and then made the bait stands from that. And this is the result. As you can see, it's got space for 4 bait boxes. Underneath we've got a bolt there to put the bank stick on. It's made of fiberglass. In places that the surface has cracked a little bit, the corners have got chipped off, and that's 1980, so 43 years of very hard wear. I think Phil only made about 4. There might have been a prototype. He had one for himself, and I think our friend Godfrey had one as well, and that was about it. The idea was to make a few and sell them for profit, but we worked out we could sell them for about £5, which was quite a bit of money back in 1980. The trouble was they cost about £6 to make, so as a business venture it wasn't very good. It's fairly heavy compared to some bait stands, but you can put your ground bait on there. That's the ground bait bowl on there. Put bait boxes on there. It is designed for round boxes, which I prefer still. I've got plenty of square ones. It works. I can do bread punch onto it, although I'd probably put something else or do it inside a ground bait bowl. Like I say, the surface is cracking up a bit here and there, but it's got another 40 years wear in there somewhere. On similar lines, this is made by Watercraft. Someone came up with this is a fairly light plastic with round holes. These holes are slightly too small for the round bait boxes that I've got. These were designed for the FGco ones. I think Pegley Davis did some as well, and I've got some unknown brand from about 1990. Quite a few bait boxes still. My FGco ones are long gone. And this has got one fixed, that's actually fixed, it doesn't come in or out, box there, and 3 holes, but you can't put a ground bait bowl on it. but it's about half the weight of my homemade one. So sometimes if I know I'm just going to use maggots, not ground bait and casters or hemp, I'll just take this one. It's a bit lighter to carry. It's possible that Drennan Tackle had one with round holes, but more recently they've done one called a Drennan Bait Waiter, which has got square holes, same design as the Watercraft one, with a fixed bit there to put your disgorger on and maybe do bread punch, and 3 square holes, quite nicely made, nice and light again. You can put a ground bait bowl on top of that, but there's no lip to stop it coming off or anything like that, but it's okay. It's one that if I do go to the square boxes, I got a feeling Drennan have gone on to a rectangular shape now on their bait boxes, which is a bit weird, but they won't, may or may not fit this one, but nice to have. One solution in the early 90s that I did a very small amount of fishing on the Trent and Mersey Canal, and when we were there, someone said, oh, what you want is a canal bait waiter, and this is what a tackle shop was having made with a bit of tubular and angle aluminium, bit of welding being done, some pop rivets to hold on a grid, and this is quite simply, it's got a load of legs on the back. Pop off the legs, put them in each of the holes and tighten it up until you've got it. There's no mud feet on it, it's designed for canal, so it sits beside your box. That was the technology of the time. It's not particularly light, quite very well made. It's something worth having. You can have a small ground bait bowl there and some bait boxes, or 3 or 4 bait boxes. Canal fishing's the sort of place where you would try out different baits. So you might have a selection, anything from bloodworm and joker, casters, pinkies, squats, big maggots and so on. So these were quite a rare thing. Like I say, they were sold in Burton on Trent in the early, I think about 1991 I bought that. Like I say, it's quite hefty, but if you're on a canal you'll probably have a trolley. Things to go on the side of boxes are nothing new. I've still got my old Shakespeare box, and it came with a couple of these clip-on boxes. I still use them. This one's smelly and full of maggot dust. If I'm only using one type of bait, I can put one bait box in there, a disgorger, maybe a plummet, and just fish away. Just saves reaching. You can have one on the other side as well. I tend to have it on my right hand side. Some people prefer it on the left hand side. It's not a difficult idea. It certainly works well made, tough plastic. On the same theme, I've got a Preston X3 box, I think it is, and it's got these on box accessories, and one of the ones is a side on bait tray. It's got a hole there, and that goes onto one of the legs, and then you adjust it to the side of your box so you can adjust the height. It's not particularly strong. I managed to crack this. I've glued back the corner on it. The glue keeps coming off. Lots of these continental style boxes have these sort of bait waiters. Some by now Preston have a really sophisticated tents to go over it to stop the sun and rain getting on your bait and all the rest of it. Huge amount of equipment that goes with these boxes, with pole rests and pole socks, special bump bars, things for keep nets and all the rest of it. So it's not bad. This tends to sag a bit. Though it's meant to be angled up, it tends to be down, but it does work, it's fine. And that's about it really. They're all useful. There are people who say, well, why don't you get a maggot bag when I'm trotting and things like that. I just end up with a mess. I don't clean them out properly. That's the problem. Next time I come to use it, or a bait apron, I find a load of stinking bits of old casters or hemp or whatever in them. But I've got them and I will use them. One final very quick thing is that someone asked me about my fishing towels that I use when I'm standing up. Nothing very difficult about them. All it is I buy cheap towels from Wilco's. They're not very much money. Nice green. I used to use sort of leftover hand towels, and this one has got a it's actually a trainer bootlace on it, which is probably about 50 inches or something like that, which is enough to go around my waist anyway and tie a knot. And I've just sewn it onto the towel in about 6 places, very quick, 4 places there, yeah, very quickly sewn it on. The stitching doesn't hold the weight up, and it's usually best if it's just folded over. And of course, when one side gets dirty, you just switch it round the other side, and you can do it the inside as well. But eventually it will need a wash. And this is a bit smelly. I've been fishing for roach and skimmers lately, so it's a bit slimy, and they haven't invented video with sniffing on it yet. Don't go there. So you can't get the whiff of that. That's it for this week. Just something to think about, the different options on bait stands. Very useful to have, certainly better than, especially if you're stood up trotting and bending down to pick up bait from a bait box on the ground, is hopeless. One thing I have used sometimes when I've had a box with me is just put the bait on top of the box and fished like that, using the top of a fishing box as a stand while I've stood trotting. So there's one other option. Until next week, that's it for now.